Hi guys, and hello everybody watching. Welcome to Lessons from Digital Crafting. This is a podcast where we are having conversations and meeting with founders to talk about their journey, developing an idea into a real product and trying to pull out some valuable lessons. I am, of course, joined by Hector Haynes, CEO of Z1 Digital Studio. And then we have some additional friends joining us today. We have Eric Mayville, co-founder and CEO of Fairgame. This is golf's first digital clubhouse that we're going to introduce you to today. And also Andrew Haynes, the executive creative director at Fairgame. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Good to see you all.
Thank you for joining. Lovely to see your faces.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thanks for having
us. Well, Eric, and of course, and thank you for joining us. We could give a little bit of background about what Fairgame is. This is a fairly new product that our teams have crafted and released together, and we're continuing to expand and look for interesting opportunities to engage. But maybe either of you could just share and introduce what is Fairgame at the risk of oversimplifying, and who is this really for?
Sure. Fairgame is kind of, as you said, one of the first digital clubhouses for golf. Golf, a very traditionally analog sport, hasn't totally entered the 21st century yet, and we're really aiming to kind of help facilitate that with Fairgame, helping connect people that share the passion for the sport, that might be like-minded, that are looking for their own kind of tribe on the course, as well as finding new ways to play the game. The game isn't just go out and hit a ball. There's a lot of different ways to enjoy yourself out on the course. And really, it's for anybody. It's for anybody that from, the professional golfer, like our business partner, Adam Scott, or the person that's picking up their clubs for the first time and don't totally understand how to play the game of golf. So it's a broad audience, which is always tough to build for too. So happy to talk about
that. Eric and Andrew, would you characterize yourselves as digital folks or golfers or a mix of both?
I'll let Andrew answer that first.
I'll go first. That's a good question. I would consider myself to be a mix of both. I think over my career, I've kind of like dabbled in a lot of different things, a little bit of digital, a little bit of branding, a little bit of advertising, a little bit of content creation, a little bit of golf. And I think being at Fairgame is, an opportunity to kind of like see passions and profession be combined. So, I think digital has always been part of, what I've done in different amounts over my career. So yeah, I'm kind of like a hybrid, if you will.
I'd say, so I picked up golf and digital at the same time. I was about 10 years old, and we used to say at my old company, which we chatted about at some point, digital, we grew up with digital and digital grew up with us. So it's really a part of who we are. And I think that's, to me, digital, anything was a passion and golf was a passion at the same time. So it really made sense to kind of combine the two.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting topic, right, for today, like how to combine passions and building a product, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we typically see digital solutions in more traditional categories, things like moving from offline insurance practices and developing new digital ways to manage things with tools and B2B enterprise tools for efficiency. But it's lovely to see an offline passion moving into a digital place to connect, engage, have a tool for yourself, but also create a community. So maybe you could share, where did this idea originate from when you were both doing digital things already? How did you come up with this idea?
Sure. So the two other co-founders that work with Andrew and I are Adam Scott, the professional golfer, and Ben Clymer, who is very famous in the watch world. We all got together and we experienced golf in a very different way. That said, there's still digital touch points with golf, but it's typically, it's in your iMessage, or it's in Instagram, or it's in the communities that already kind of exist in a very disparate way. And there's no real easy way to discover other like-minded individuals that, again, you would enjoy playing golf with. The one weird thing about golf is you typically play with strangers. And so when you look at what technology's been able to do for, dating, for example, or even the professional world, like, it's there to eliminate barriers of this kind of like only meeting with strangers. You wouldn't go to dinner with somebody for the first time necessarily for 4 hours, or just be paired with somebody randomly at the restaurant. But you would go to a golf course and spend 4 hours with them. So that doesn't always work out well. And we talked about that. We talked about the fact that we all live in very different places. I'm originally from Ohio. I live in New York. Can't keep up with my friends in Ohio that are golfing. Adam lives in Switzerland. He's from Australia. So like using the power of technology to like easily represent, what the golf world for each individual is, I think was for us a no-brainer, just because we, again, like we just said, we kind of grew up with this and it's kind of second nature. However, it's not necessarily second nature for everybody. So we wanted to build a tool or a platform that would streamline all of it.
Andrew, was there something in particular that spoke to you in the early days about thinking to solve problems here?
Oh, for me, I think, obviously, I think, when I met with Ben and Eric and Adam and heard the vision for the company, I was really excited. I love golf and I love building things. So, this opportunity was something that I was like, hey, I want to be a part of this team. But I think for me, I think that there's a lot of power when you think about building brands, digital brands, and just, I guess beyond that, just brands as a whole. There's something really powerful that happens when you combine this sense of, really fulfilling a need first and foremost, because I think sometimes there are so many products and things that have come along that have filled this hole. Sometimes we've realized that hole was there. Sometimes we haven't. So that's always really nice. But then also when you do it in a way that, I don't know, I guess the one word that I would say for it is that it's sticky or tangible, where it's something that people have an emotional connection to. And I think the combination of making a smart product, creating it in a really strong, powerful visual way, and making it so people can seamlessly integrate it into their lives. It's easy. It's not complicated. I mean, when you think about what the iPhone did for the phone, like, we forget because it's been part of our life for so long. So I think, just being able to create seamless technology that you don't really have to think about, that just smoothly worked its way into your life, is really powerful. And I think, for us, we strive to try to achieve that perfect balance of product, experience, brand, design, et cetera, just to make, the golf space better. Golf's been around for a long time and it's not going anywhere, which is really cool. But there's definitely opportunities for us to integrate technology in a smart way that, every consumer can benefit from.
And in the early days, did you have that feeling of, as soon as you started talking about this idea, like, to be surprised that there was not real solutions to the need that you were feeling super strongly? Is something that more and more it's feeling weird, because that there are solutions for almost everything, sometimes are not very good. But how did you run the process of research / discovering that there was a great opportunity in the market?
Sure. So I've golfed since, it's 28 years now. So you would think that I would have come across something. There are certainly people out there, but when you get into golf is not, the people that are golfing now, it's getting better, but typically weren't coming from the technology sector or the design sector, there are clearly little pockets of it, but predominantly the money in golf is coming from the finance world, lawyers, doctors, and people that were running very different types of businesses. And so while they had money to invest to build products, I don't think that many of them came from it with a human-centric design approach. They didn't think about like what the actual competition is. The competition is a pencil and paper when you're on the golf course. So that is, you can't be more difficult to use than that. And so, taking our experience, we're lucky and fortunate to have a team that's built up of folks with user experience, of deep user experience backgrounds, deep branding backgrounds, and one of the biggest names in the sport, which is a unique recipe that I don't think many other of our competitors have had. And so, there's also the point of just like, when you see the competition and the research we did, you're like, I know exactly how we would make that better. And right. So you look at it as like, all right, here's a chance for us to kind of put our flag in the ground and make it better, and take, again, a more modern approach. I think golf, much like some other industries, you mentioned insurance and things like that, even, is probably 10 to 15 years behind the rest of the internet, would be my guess, if I looked at like the way things are built, the technology things are built in. And so there are first movers, but they're kind of stuck in the 2010s. And so, that brings us to want to bring it to 2023 and beyond.
It's interesting also, like how there are like some spaces that, I mean, like you made an analogy that is great for products sometimes. Like, think about competitors are everything, not just digital competitors, right? And also I would say another thing, like sometimes when you see a crappy competitor, but I mean, a lot of people assume that that's okay. I mean, the app is pretty ugly, but it does the work, right? It's like I use it for, I don't know, like booking something in the gym or wherever. So like having the motivation to also do something better and with a modern approach, right? Like trying to think about that. And actually that's something that was my main question for this conversation. Is like, how did you manage your own bias of what you thought that was the most important thing for this app based on your experience, and trying to be more objective about, okay, what's needed for the audience? How did you balance between both visions for the product?
That's a good question. I'll give a quick thing, and then hopefully Andrew can add some. The way you balance is that there is no leader. And so even if I looked at every app that existed or whatever, if you asked 1 million golfers, they're going to give you, 500 different reasons or what they use now. And so we kind of just sat in our own mind and said, again, if our competition, we looked at it as pencil and paper. We didn't look at the digital solutions. How are we going to be easier to use than that? How are we going to limit the steps of doing everything? How are we going to remove any type of friction to playing and enjoying the game of golf? And for that, it's just like thinking about every little step of the process, from when you're planning the round to on the first tee. Oh, we didn't set things up before, so how can we do it on the first tee within 3 clicks? How can we do it with I think that it was really just looking inside, and it was intentional to kind of put the blinders on to hopefully take a new approach that hadn't been taken before.
I think, just to build on that, I think, at least from my perspective, it's a combination of one, using the things that we've learned over our careers, just, working in, adjacent industries, but, really understanding like what is successful in the world when it comes to brand building, experiences, et cetera, creating those tangible, brands that consumers grow to love, first and foremost. And then the second thing I think is really important to make sure that, when you're creating something, I think a lot of brands forget that it's important to, I don't want to say get designed by committee or make decisions by committee, but making sure that you're really thinking about it from the perspective of different consumers. Like, I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine who is starting to make some apparel, and we were talking about this other brand who I will not name, but like there's something in clothing where, you're making a shirt and there's a sample, and you start with, okay, how do we define the cut? This needs to be shoulders here, this here, this here. And the founder of the brand is a smaller guy. So, he uses himself. And this is what happens instinctually. You make things for yourself and then you share it with the world. So he sized everything off of himself and then just used that as the golden ratio and then built it out from there. And I think, I got the larger version of it and it did not fit me because I'm just not that small of a guy. But I think for us at Fairgame, it's like, from day one, making sure that we are really thinking about golf from every perspective. We have Adam. Adam is at the very top, right? You know, he has played on tour for years. He's won the Masters. He understands what the highest version of the game looks like. You know, you've got, you know, Ben and Eric, who grew up playing, have played competitively, like play regularly, really good players. You've got a person like me. I picked up in my 20s. You know, I consider myself to be like a weekend warrior, but I love the game. You know, our product manager, Jamie, you know, is a beginner, just started. You know, our UX guy, you know, just picked up the game recently. So we're really making sure that like every decision that we make, we're getting perspectives from people that are at different points of the game. We all love the same thing, but we all look and need for different things. And when you actually take a step back and have those conversations, identify those key problems, it makes it a lot easier to identify, you know, what is kind of like rising to the top. That being said, you know, you're never going to do something that pleases everyone, but you can make something that, you know, checks more boxes than not, that without, you know, making it, you know, overly convoluted. So I think if anything, it's making sure that you're really, you know, listening to the needs of your entire consumer base. I think golf is probably a little bit more complicated than what some other brands tend to deal with. Like, we need to appeal to newer golfers, which are probably going to be a little bit more tech savvy, younger minded, versus, you know, you've got your 52-year-old, you know, older guy who's been playing for 30 years, making sure that our product appeals to each of those audiences. So let's make it modern but approachable. We can't get too crazy. Let's make it, you know, really clean, simple, intuitive, just to make sure that like whoever you are, young, old, kid, whatever, like you understand this, you get it, and then you can kind of like do your thing. So I think it's a combination of those things: smart branding and really smart, streamlined consensus would be my answer.
I'd love to double click on that and see if we can get a better picture of maybe some of the activities that you might have found helpful, either in validating your idea or even informing designs. I mean, I hear that, Eric, you probably fit into very well into one of the user stories that you were crafting.
Sure.
What type of activities could you share more about that helped you make sure you were designing for multiple t-shirt sizes?
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot of opportunity. If you look at a scorecard for golf, for example, like it's just a bunch of blank squares. That's super intimidating, I think. You don't know which row you're supposed to be riding, and you don't know what it means to be playing. You know, let alone the fact that you got yourself to the golf course, which is no small hurdle. Golf has a huge accessibility problem, accessibility to equipment, accessibility to courses. Everything costs a lot of money. So once you get there, it needs to kind of become second nature. I equate it kind of to bowling. So the way that I'm not a very good bowler, but I don't have to think about bowling when I go bowling because everything's on the computer now. You just go and they keep score for you. And so what we tried to do and what we wanted to do, again, back to like removing any of the friction, was, you know, how can you move from one page on to another? And so like validating it, one of the first test rounds I ever played was with, it was just up the road at this great golf course. And there was an older gentleman we were playing with who had used a competitor, but his biggest complaint was he couldn't see what was on the screen. Plus you had to like tap and then you would enter a number. I handed him, I said, can you keep score for this hole? At the end of it, he did it. He goes, I didn't even have to change the size of anything. It just all like very much made sense. I didn't have to tap a million buttons because we start with numbers that equate to par. He immediately got it. He goes, this is good. He's probably 60 some odd years old. So to me, that was a huge win. For the brand itself, though, I think if we step back, like the strategy was to create a brand that would be sticky, so that we could kind of tackle some of these things. And maybe Andrew can tackle this a bit more, but there was no kind of gender neutral, race neutral, like socioeconomic neutral voice in golf. You know, there's people trying it. There's people coming from the news side of things, the tour only. There's people that are just talking about, you know, their own brands or fashion. But I think what Andrew and Ben have done in a really good way is build that kind of like very like exciting, but a voice that kind of can be for anybody, which again, the app is trying to be too. So those two things have to work together. And so, you know, that's been validated by just people telling us great things about how much they love what Andrew does with our Instagram or with our content that he shoots with Adam. It's been really rewarding to see.
I admire your commitment to research in the field, Eric.
Yes, absolutely.
All those times where you've skipped away to the golf course.
Yeah.
Honey, I'm simply validating product.
I'm working.
That's it.
Actually, you brought like a very interesting thing. Like, firstly, I mean, like building for your passion. I mean, I think it's pretty, not only your passion, it's like a field that you know pretty well, and also overlapping that with some skills that you might have, right? That makes you, when you were like defining the roster of the founding teams, like, well, that's a unfair and competitive advantage, right? It's like, you know about 4 archetypes directly, and that's a lot, right? But for me, it's also very interesting to talk, and Andrew was expanding a little bit about that, because also as a studio, we'll put a lot of value on design, branding, apart from the functionality of each product. I mean, we are in an age of digital products that is very important. Everyone talks about job to be done, prioritizing, like solving problems and things like that. But Andrew, you're mentioning a lot of times branding. And I'm also following that path as well. I mean, the market is saturated with a lot of solutions, and branding is becoming, again, a huge advantage as well, because you want to feel people part of something, right? So could you expand something about your vision on that, and how you think, like, how much is branding from early days, even before having anything, because you had a podcast, you had Instagram, right? Like everything around that. How do you think the brand is super important compared to the functionality as well that you're solving in order to get that go-to-market strategy?
Sure. I think it's all about, from my perspective, it's all about creating that, perfect formula of, first of all, when you take a step back, and again, it's really looking outside yourself and really understanding what the consumer landscape looks like. I think we've reached a point in culture where there are more and more consumers, not just in golf, but as a whole, that have a higher sense of awareness when it comes to design and branding. I feel like there was a point where, I was the only person that was using an away luggage suitcase. And now, like, that language, that way of living has kind of like started to permeate into, like, everyone's life, and people are wearing Allbirds, and like, just people are expecting design to be part of their products, through and through the entire experience. So one is understanding that, like, yes, more people are aware and want modern design. And then 2, once you are able to check those basic boxes of, yes, does this work? Does it meet a need? I think when you strike that balance, when you hit that sweet spot of a really powerful product wrapped up in a really powerful package, that's what makes you hard to beat. I think when you look at the marketplace, and we really thought about this as well, is that we're not the first golf app, and we won't be the last. But I think, or even with like an Instagram or Facebook, like, that wasn't the first social network. But when you think about this idea of branding and utility, that's where you can really create something that's powerful and tangible, because people need to be able to feel an emotional connection to what they're using and experiencing, no matter what it is, even down to, like, a box of cereal, or, when you buy an iPhone, like, that box is designed a certain way to make you feel something. So, if someone is on the golf course or scrolling through our app and looking at their friends round, or absorbing other forms of content, to make sure that, we're creating this platform and this pedestal for golf to be shown in a way that they've never seen before. I think that is where that stickiness happens, because we're not the first people to talk about golf, and we won't be the last. But I think if there is a way to do it in a way that hasn't been done before, that feels modern and fresh and inclusive, I think that it's always about trying to find that perfect balance of the two.
That's great. That's super inspiring. I mean, I'm a lot into the design ethics and thinking about the impact of design in overall life of people. And I like to think about design that it's an industry about the consequences and the effects of what we do on people's lives, right? So when we're designing something, we're not designing something that will cause something. We are already designing that something, that effect, right? So when thinking about branding, I mean, I really agree. I like that, to hearing from you, an expert on thinking about that. Like, when you're crafting that brand, you're also creating a different cosmovision, a different vision of the world that you're using, right? Going to the court is different if you're using a different experience or a different brand, right? So that's very inspiring, and yeah, it's great to hear.
Andrew, I hear you talking about the importance of exceeding user expectations right away. And I hear Eric alluding very gently, but I'm sure there's more, to the details and complexity inside the game of golf. Was it difficult to try and translate all those nuances into a simple enough user experience for the first product?
I think so. I think the hardest thing was really, one, you have to understand golf, and there's a lot of nuance. It's a very simple game, but when you think about all of the variables and different ways to play and game types and formats and structures, I think we have lots of conversations about making sure that we're checking all those boxes, and you have to do that work just to stress test it. I think that's the hardest part, is to really like put everything in the pot. Like, what are all the problems, and really let it simmer and distill down to the essentials. And then you get to this point where like, oh, this makes sense. This work, this kind of like checks all the boxes. So, I think just with time and making sure that, yes, you are doing the work to have those in-depth conversations, get user feedback. We'll go out and test it, just to make sure that we're really trying to make sure that we're building something that anyone can use, and that is, pretty much bulletproof in a sense. And we're always adapting and learning every day. That's our long-term goal. So not hard. I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's part of the process. You have to do it. But
Sure.
I think we're really happy with where we've landed.
Nice.
Eric, how about you? Did you find it difficult to try and, I guess, not teach the people that were working
Sure.
with you in developing products, but how do you communicate all those complexities, but also keep the app simple enough?
So golf is a simple sport with very complicated elements. So like things that we don't have to worry about, thank God, like etiquette. Golf is an etiquette sport, and to teach that to somebody is very hard, because a lot of it's just, you think it's second nature. But when it comes to the logic of the sport, and coming from a background of designing digital products and platforms, explaining the logic of golf to a developer or a product person or a designer that doesn't golf just takes a lot of examples. So turning around and putting it into a spreadsheet and showing what happens if you shoot a par on this hole and a bogey on this hole, and your other person, like just a lot of very hands-on examples of what is going on in a game. I even went to at one point when we were working with the UX person, I live streamed myself playing PGA 2K21 to him. And so he would watch me on YouTube like this. He was my only viewer. I don't have a future in video game streaming, sadly. But I sat there on a call with him, and I played match play, skins play, everything, so that he could ask questions while we were playing. Why did that person win that hole? Because the handicap said X. And so I think it's, this is, again, coming from a similar world as Z1, when we were tackling areas where we weren't the subject matter experts, you really needed to have that person that want to partner with you really well. And so hopefully that we've been that, because I certainly remember getting into industries where I didn't know anything, and it took us a long time to learn it. And so, that's what I think also happens in golf. It's so second nature to the golfer that when they try to explain it to whoever's building their world in their app, it gets lost in translation very easily. So just being as specific as possible with these kind of complex inputs to give a simple output was pretty critical. And it's still, we're tackling it every day, because we find little nuances of, oh, we didn't think about that. And now we have to. So what's that going to do? And how's that going to impact everything? But I think it's just being specific and explicit with how it really works, and not just letting it live up kind of in the air.
Mm-hmm. Well, Hector, maybe you could share more, zooming out from this particular product. When we have a product squad that is approaching a new build of something that we're not necessarily experts in, how does a team get deep into discovery in a really niche market?
Yeah, well, the short form answer right now will be through ChatGPT, but that's a joke, right? Like, I have to say, I asked ChatGPT about some golf rules, and it explains it pretty well. it could be helpful for also explaining offside in soccer, that I know that it's also a very weird rule that no one can apply,
Yes.
right? So yeah, well, I mean, we used to say, and we usually say, that we're experts on crafting digital experiences, but every founder that we work with, they are experts in their fields, right? Golf is super complex, but also we have built like some fintech products that I personally barely understand, right? The team understands them, but yeah, I mean, a first approach is like, yeah, because in a similar way, right? Like, you're experts in golf and digital, and some people come from, I don't know, finance work, and they see an opportunity, and it's like a super niche, and it's difficult to understand. So sometimes, I mean, there are a ton of activities and tools. Firstly, is like to be open-minded, to use digital patterns, to use universal patterns, but also don't stick with them for everything. Also trying to understand the foundational elements of what you're trying to build, and come back to some mental models like first principles and things like that, like what Eric said, like not just through examples only. Is it more about trying to understand the nature of what you're trying to build in order to map out? Because sometimes it's true that some experiences feel at first glance like very complex, but then you zoom out a little and you see it as a system, and it's like, oh, actually this is not very different from Airbnb for wherever, right? And then just adding the complexity to some specific interactions, right? So that's one thing. The other is to be very open-minded, to be and that's something that we try to nurture in our team, like to be eager to learn new things. That's honestly, that's something that I still appreciate, that is a great value for Set1, right? Like how we can have access to all these worlds at the same time, right? And get from the inside some information that is very difficult to acquire outside, right? And trying to also, like delegating good practices and system thinking in order to define overall experiences, and again, also like get guided by the founders that at the end of the day, they are like the experts, and help them more universal UX patterns and good practices, right? So I think it's a matter of finding good balance, and also through the years we have like overlapping or compounded learning through platforms that in some way they are similar, and we can apply learnings from other spaces that are applicable in new markets as well, right? So yeah, it's tricky, but also I would say that at a huge percentage, I mean, I think it's one of the most critical values that we bring as a studio, right? Like trying to understand something in order to shape it up in a good way, and not just doing wherever, right? And that's the difficult part, but it's the interesting one too, right?
I think you hit like a very big and important thing that, you know, we've really enjoyed working with you guys on, is the idea that there are these patterns that people expect within a user experience, and they can fit into any of these different worlds. That's what hasn't happened in golf. People haven't built something in the way that people expect it to work. And so, and that kind of expectation is what we hope everybody sees. And ideally, the brand's roots are so deep, it doesn't matter if the competitors come in and just kind of take over or try to copy or whatever. So certainly. I think that's super important.
Yeah, and actually, because there are like sometimes like some bias toward those design universal principles or patterns, like, oh, that's copying, right? That's not creative, right? And we are big fans of being creative for specific things, for specific moments, for specific elements. But the majority of all experiences have to be part of a trend, of a zeitgeist, right? Like it has to be part of, if someone is coming to your app from TikTok, I'm not saying that you have to copy TikTok interactions, but in some way there are like some patterns that should be similar because they expect it to be similar, right? I know that for Fairgame, Instagram has been a huge influence, but because Instagram is super well crafted, and it makes no sense to do an anti-pattern from Instagram, right? It makes no sense, right? But then maybe, and something specifically about something that you like for the match, for something in the app, it's like, okay, let's be creative here, and that's also a good thing. But yeah, finally patterns are very good practice on design, and even technology as well, right? Like make it easier to be built. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, because those things are interesting. I think it's like brands create patterns and they put a product out there, and that just becomes the norm, and it becomes the thing that we can do like with our eyes closed. So you have to at least acknowledge those things and consider them when you're creating your product or your experience. And then you look for those opportunities, like you're saying, to adapt and refine, because, hey, this is great, or hey, this little feature from this product over here is interesting. How can we take that and make it better? Or how can we take that and put our spin on it? I think for us, it's like there are a lot of great things out there that are happening in different areas across different digital products. And how can we pick off a little bit of the things that we're liking across not just one product, but the entire category, the things that we think are rising to the top, and unify those things in one place. I think that's kind of like the overall goal, where no one has truly, there isn't one brand out there, and I'm not even saying this is us yet, but like there hasn't been one brand, I think, in the digital space, in any space, when you think about like e-commerce or apps or whatnot, that has been able to hit the bullseye in every area, right? But all we can do is that, hey, look, let's really take a step back and look at what is working across multiple areas, and how can we implement as many of those things into our product as we can. Exactly. And then we learn and adapt as consumers give us feedback.
Are you learning a lot from current users? Like, are you getting surprising feedback that is like, oh, we didn't thought of that, or it's actually a problem? It's like, what type of feedback are you receiving in order to improve the current experience?
We get a lot of feedback. Like, I get feedback from my buddies that are using it at the golf course I play. They're like, I just want it to do boom, boom, boom. I don't want to post. I want to just hit the score. Like a lot of like, okay, we get it. We get messages about, if like calculating a handicap is legitimately calculus. My last math class was junior year of high school. So if we have an error there, we apologize, but there is so many nuanced elements to that too. Like we had a guy today that just truly identified the problem for us, which was great for some math issues that we're having. But golfers, for the most part, like even the ones that are having issues, they stick with Fairgame. They are like, they keep using it. They don't have any problems using it. They don't have any problem continuing to use it, even as we fix things or improve it. And I think that, it very much comes from the world of you need to listen to what everyone wants, but you also need to put it through a filter. On the exact same other side, like for the most part, when we were designing things for other folks at my previous agency, it was, you are not the user. Well, here I am, but I also need to put that through a filter. So whatever that comes out to be, we look for not the lowest common denominator, but a lot of the synchronicities between the two in terms of what each group is seeing, and try to use that to improve what the product can be. So it's great. Golfers have opinions, so
yeah, that they do. Lots of opinions. Yeah, I think it's been cool. Like, we get some really honest, candid feedback, because everyone plays golf differently. So it's cool to hear, hey, when I play this, and I always play this format, and like this specific way, like, might you create these types of problems that need to be addressed? So that feedback, comes in and we address, which is really cool, because, our users might play a game or a format that, we just don't play all the time.
The great example there, Andrew. Sorry to interrupt you. The great example was when we launched in Australia. They pretty much primarily play the game format called Stableford. We play that here maybe once a year, twice a year in big tournaments. That's how they play golf. And so once we got, 5, 6, 7 inbounds of saying, hey, when will you have Stableford? It's more than just a pattern. It's something we know we have to put in there. So that's been super interesting to learn. And even, Adam mentioned that at one point. I don't recall me thinking it was such a big deal that we didn't have Stableford. And now we know it is, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. And even beyond that, I was just going to say that, like, we're also getting some really powerful feedback on, we have a very long list of immediate fixes and immediate additions and future additions, where we're really thinking, down the line, like, what are those layers of things that we can add and build as we refine and get sharper? Like there's been some very like nuancy features. I won't reveal too much, but a user was saying that I want to play live, but I only want certain people to know that I'm playing and not. So like we're thinking through all those things just to make sure that, like, yes, we are addressing, every, user scenario possible, and we'll launch those things in time as we learn and grow and make the app better. But we'll kind of like start with the core and then kind of like expand and get more nuance as we go from there.
Okay, so we can assume that users usually are surprised, right? Like surprising you with requests that you didn't even thought for, right?
They're hitting us with some good ones, that's for sure. They're like, again, it's golf is funny in the sense that people have a lot of opinions. Golf is a private thing a lot of times, but also people still want that like connection on the internet. So like, how do you balance that? Like that exact example from Andrew is that's going to be a complex one that we try to tackle. But yeah, we're learning a lot from him because golf geographically is very different. So like we live here in New York, it's going to be very different in Spain, and Portugal is very big in golf. Like when we launched there, like the games that you guys play, we're going to learn in the West Coast, in Canada, California, like from all the way from where you are, Michelle, down to California, there's probably 8 different subcultures of golf that play it in a very different way. They play different formats. And we want to be the place for all of them. So we just have to do that without, trying to do it all at once.
Yeah, well, I suppose overwhelming feature requests could be a good signal that it's actually getting used and people are being thoughtful about how to use it in their own lives and how to optimize and expand. So I'm thrilled for you. I know that there are some ambitious ideas about where this entire venture could grow in different areas. And as Andrew says, we certainly will not reveal anything too early, but I'm excited to see where this goes. Maybe a final thought from each of you. This mobile app, first version, has been in market, I think, approaching a first-year anniversary in the hands of real users soon. Looking back into the beginning of the journey around productizing a personal passion, if a buddy of yours was thinking of developing, a mobile app for the community of pottery and ceramics, what sort of advice would you give to that person to the first step on this journey?
Call Z1.
Yeah.
That's an unpaid. Look, I think that my perspective, and I think Andrew probably shares it because we talk about it all the time, is that the internet has been very broad for a long time for a lot of people, but the people that have been on the internet for a long time have easily found their little niche communities. But I think as things evolve now, you're going to want to go more towards those like vertically centric social networks where you can just go super deep on a passion that you don't have to feel embarrassed about. Growing up in Ohio, which is a big football state, I played golf during football season. Did I tell a lot of people that? No. I had to. Did I wear my golf shirt to school? No. But with my golf buddies, I talked about it nonstop, and with my family, I talked about it nonstop. And here, I can do that too, where I don't have to bombard, Instagram or Twitter or anything else with it. So do it. That's the first thing. Take the first step and build it, because each person's passion, there's other people that have it and have that same passion. They might experience it in a slightly different way, which will only be, I think, more rewarding and rich for you to understand how they enjoy it. So I just say you got to take the first step. You got to do it.
Nice.
Andrew, any opportunities to polish his shine there?
Yeah, I mean, pottery is great. I don't know. I've been thinking about taking some pottery classes. So now my brain is going down pottery. But I think first and foremost is that there is nothing more powerful. I think that if you are truly passionate about something, it is core to who you are. I've worked in, advertising and agencies and startups, for years. And I think that was always one of the things that we always sought for in finding people, talent, et cetera, is that you got to live and breathe the brand, because it's like, if it isn't part of you, it's just going to be really hard to make. So if you find something that you're passionate about, making and creating that thing, there will be hurdles and challenges, but it'll be easy because it'll just feel like it's part of you. And then also making sure that as you're building it, you're being fluid and receptive to feedback, and really being aware and, critical of yourself and saying, hey, this is good. How can we make it better? I think that, especially in the digital space, like I used to work for a magazine, and we would design everything and you would print it. And then when it's printed, it's done, right? And it's that issue is closed and it's on paper and it's on the shelf. But I think with the digital space, especially as the world evolves, is that everything is always changing and moving and fluid. And you have to really think about brands that way, where it can't just be this templatized out of the box thing. You have to create something and know that it needs to be this chameleon that changes and evolves and moves as you grow and flex. So once you define that kind of like core passion, core interest, core product, be really receptive and flexible to evolving it over time. Because I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we've seen in golf is that people do things, and no shade to anybody out there. They make some really great things that meet a need for a certain time. But I think sometimes it's really easy to get comfortable and kind of like sit and be like, all right, this is good enough. Well, let's just let it ride. But just making sure that in the modern world that we have to continue to evolve, be fluid, be flexible, because, you know, just refresh that page and then, you know, something new can pop up. So yeah, that's all I'd say. I want to go do some pottery now, by the way. I want to go spin.
Big fans of hobbies and passions. So yeah, it was a great closing claim, right? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm delighted to have you in our community of people that we partner with to craft new things. I thank you for standing up and being leaders in front of early founders who could learn a lot from you. So thank you so much. If people want to learn more about you, connect with you, or get onto this app, where would you direct them to go?
Cool. Fairgamegolf.com, or, you know, there it is. Right there.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, guys. I thank everybody for listening today. I sincerely hope that somebody has learned something new as we are trying to demystify the journey from 0 to 1. So you can subscribe anywhere that you get your podcasts for more lessons from digital crafting. And we'll look forward to speaking with you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Later.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.